Hello, Debbie Talalaly. Thank you so much for joining me today on Best Way to Divorce. And we're going to be talking about the invisible bonds of marriage and why they can cause such a problem after divorce, and even to the point of fueling a more aggressive divorce, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And we were both just discussing an article in The Spectator where they're putting forward the point of view, which we've been hearing quite a bit recently, over the recent changes in the divorce law that's going to be taking place to get rid of fault-based divorce, which is a great thing. But their worry is that we're making divorce too easy, and they've got some interesting ideas about the concept that you shouldn't just be able to end a divorce without there being blame. They seem to feel that that's somehow important. What are your thoughts on that, Debbie?
Well, first of all, I think it's brilliant that people can get out of a loveless or an abusive marriage, and that they don't need the other person's say-so to be able to do that. I think that's brilliant. I think when there has been abuse in a marriage, a mistreatment, it can often leave a person very, very bitter and looking for revenge. And that's what this article is all about. It's it's about marking the other person as having done wrong. But I don't know that that does any good to anyone. What really helps is if you can get the person who has been abused within the marriage to drop it, to start to live for themselves rather than as a response to the abuser. That's how I think it should be done.
And one of the things that I found interesting reading the article is what they weren't talking about. There's something invisible that I've become aware of through you, basically. And I know you've got an article on this coming out in on a law firm, Saracen's law firm blogs very soon. And it's about the invisible bonds of marriage, so that when someone goes through the ceremony of marriage, it isn't something that people do lightly. It's far more profound than perhaps the writer of the Spectator article realizes. Can you say a little bit about that? Because you've had some experiences of that, haven't you?
I've had quite a lot in my practice, yes. Well, for thousands of years, people have been bonding themselves to each other. They call it marriage. And they've done it for social reasons, to keep themselves safe financially, and in order to have a framework in which to bring up their children. Now, we're moving away from that a little bit now. We are having it slightly easier financially. People can raise their own children as singletons. It's not easy, but they do. But the necessity for marriage is lessening. But when you do marry, what you are doing is vowing to the other person to do certain things, to stay with them, to have fidelity, to all sorts of things. A vow isn't to be taken lightly. It is a very, very serious commitment. And I don't think we realize how serious it is. Our unconscious mind realizes how serious it is, but on the face of it, we don't. So people are getting married to help people get their passports. People are getting married just to give it a try, and if it doesn't work, well, they'll get out. But the collateral fallout on that is that actually somehow they've betrayed themselves and the other person because of these vows they've made, which they're not adhering to. And if there are any children, it is a disaster for the kids. Absolute disaster. And now, having said, I must just qualify that. People do get divorced. There is a need for the divorce, and children do get over it. But if it can be avoided by not going into marriage in the first place, if it's really not suitable, it's better.
I completely agree. I think one of the key things that they were missing in the article is talking about the preparation that people need for marriage, that they don't get enough support, they don't get enough separation. Trying to sort of glue it all back together at the end isn't ultimately going to be the solution. No. But what we do have is a situation, isn't it? And your work as a homeopath and a theta healer has brought you into contact with this. As people who do deal with divorce, they go through it, and yet they're still linked very heavily to the other person, and sometimes they don't even realize it. Other people notice. Can you describe some of the...
That's the bonds that I was talking about. It's the vows that they have not realized would have such a pull on them. you can't just say, okay, I've got my bit of paper, I've got my decree nisi, that is it, because it isn't it. It's a piece of paper given by the government. It hasn't made you break your bonds. Now, if you hated your partner, that's a very, very strong bond. If you loved your partner and have been discarded, again, a very strong bond. And those bonds need to be offered back up again, cut gently, offered back up.
So, because in a way we have a ceremony, don't we, with a marriage, but there isn't a ceremony for the divorce. And there's a sort of psychological need for that, isn't there?
I do believe there is a pub opposite the law courts in Lincoln's Inn who have massive stocks of champagne for people who have divorced. So in a way, I suppose that's their ceremony. But I don't know if it deals with the vows. And I've seen enough people in my practice who are still bound to the other person.
And how does that play out? How do you see that?
One lady was, she couldn't let go what the ex was doing. What's he doing? Where's he going? Is he looking after himself? What's he doing there? How come he could do it for her and not for me? That sort of thing. Another one, still cooking for her ex and doing his shopping. Wow. Well, no, there were very good reasons. The reasons being that if the children were to go there, they needed to find food. So there were very, very good reasons. But on the other hand, it sends a very mixed message out. People who had put themselves into poverty so that they wouldn't have to pay alimony. All sorts of things that people are doing as a reaction to the breakup, a reaction to their bitterness, resentment, wish for revenge, and also to the invisible bond that still exists between those two people.
So how do you break that? Because what you're saying there is that by breaking that bond, that kind of obsessiveness, that ongoing hostility could somehow effectively dissolve.
Yes, it does. So I break the bonds for them. Not in a harsh manner, but with a thank you. That's it. Let it go back now. Let us start anew. And I break the bonds for them on an energy level.
And is that using your Theta Healing techniques?
It is.
So can you just explain a little bit more for those who've never come across Theta Healing?
So Theta Healing is a way of redirecting the thoughts in the head so you don't end up at the same destination every time. So every time you think of A, you end up at B, and it's usually fairly negative, has a negative impact on you and your body. So what I do is I cut the links, I redirect the brain, of course, with the person's permission. They're conscious, fully conscious the entire time. And we just don't make that the final destination anymore. And they find they can breathe again. They feel lighter. They're not going down the same road. The mind doesn't just end up in the same place every single time. People mostly say, I feel so much lighter. That is the most common response.
So in a way, are you using...
Something's lifted.
Yeah, getting similar results to what people would normally think of something like hypnosis, but you're not having to hypnotize them in any way.
Not at all. They're fully part of the conversation.
And have you had anybody that you've done this with the bond breaking? What's the kind of results that they've had?
They just feel free to get on with their lives. They feel free to look out for new partners, because that's another thing. They're still bound to somebody else. So they're not actually free to start again. It's just generally everything is very much better. And this feeling of, thinking about it all the time, the mind goes back to it all the time. It goes. And that makes that person feel very much lighter and very much happier.
And so how do people find out more about this?
Well, they come to my website, and there's a number of videos there, explanatory videos to saying what Theta Healing is and what I do. There are a number of videos which actually take you through certain states which are for sale. So one of the best ones for people who are divorcing is I'm redundant.
And to lose that withheld that belief that
they've to lose. Yes, so this is more generalized than coming to see me personally, but it's got pretty well everything I could think of at the time. It's about an hour's worth of processing, and it's actual processing. It's not me having a nice little chat or playing music subliminally or anything like that. It's the same as you coming to see me, and it's the same energy process, and it works.
That's fantastic. So, people can do that in any place, anytime, anywhere, and a lot less expensive than coming to see you one-to-one.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll add I've got the link to your website here, but I'll find that video and add that to this post. Thank you so much, Debbie. It's been a pleasure as always, and I look forward to seeing some comments around this later on today.
Thank you, Susie.
Bye-bye.
Bye.